For some reason, the AP preseason poll still exists. We'll try and figure out why that is, maybe, on this version of the Podcast Daily for a Tuesday with Bill Landis and Austin Ward. Ohio State is number 2 in this preseason poll, if you are keeping score. They received 15 first-place votes. Georgia is number 1 in both the coaches and the AP poll, Bill. And I don't know that should come as any surprise, but we have been asked a number of times, hey, why is that? Because the Buckeyes have assembled an all-star team.
That's true, they have. I don't. It's not surprising that Georgia is number 1. I did not vote in this. I think I would vote Ohio State number 1 if I was doing a preseason poll. What I am surprised by is that in both polls, Georgia is such an overwhelming number 1. That does not make much sense to me because this is not a Georgia team that is coming off of a national championship. In fact, this is a Georgia team that is coming off of a season in which it did not make the playoff at all. And it seems like they're getting treated like a returning national champion for some reason, and I don't quite understand that.
You're also seeing a ton of, I saw someone at an outlet that I mention a lot by name, so I won't do it. They're like, well, if there'd been a 12-team playoff last year, Georgia definitely would have won it. Georgia is very good. I think Georgia and Ohio State clearly have the 2 most talented rosters in the country, but it's a little bit strange to me that they are getting so much more benefit of the doubt when I'd say in a lot of cases their years last year were similar, Ohio State and Georgia. The recruiting rankings are very similar. I guess Carson Beck is more proven for Georgia specifically, and Kirby Smart has won a national championship. So if those were the decisions that voters were having, I suppose that I could understand why they're getting 3 times as many first place votes as Ohio State.
Yeah, I guess so. If you break it down piece by piece, you probably give the edge to Georgia to quarterback and offensive line. I don't think you give it to him at receiver. I don't think you give it to him at running back. And then defense, I kind of like what Ohio State has going on, right? Ohio State, I think you give it to Ohio State in the secondary. Maybe you probably give it to Georgia up front. Although I'm not so sure because this is not the same dominant defensive front from Georgia that we saw on the front end of their back-to-back national championship run, right? And again, it's not that Georgia is good. Georgia recruits very well. They have a proven formula there. They have won national championships. I fully believe that Georgia will be in the conversation come the end of the year. I'm wondering why they are getting showered with so much praise at the moment when, to your point, they are a team that is also coming off a season colored by disappointment, right? It's how disappointed can you be for not winning 3 national championships in a row? I understand the bar there is incredibly high and probably unrealistic, but they have goals just like Ohio State does, and they didn't achieve them. They're bringing back a roster that is good, but by its standards, probably not a world beater, right? There are some cracks in there that I think you can find, and I think Ohio State's roster is very good. So, like I said, I would have given Ohio State a first place vote. It's not that Georgia's wholly undeserving, but I think it was 46 first place votes in both polls that Georgia got. Ohio State got more in the AP poll, which I was glad to see, and I think Oregon might have gotten one in the AP poll, which is interesting. So there's a little bit of I think more forward thinking there, and not just relying on the status quo necessarily with the AP poll. But
Oregon was the only other team to receive a first place vote.
Yeah, I just don't think Doug and I have talked about this on Kings of the North quite a bit. So I apologize if you've heard that before, and I'm kind of beating a dead horse here. But I just don't think this season is everyone gearing up to chase Georgia like that. I think that is a wrong view on what the 2024 college football season is going to be, but both polls seem to suggest otherwise.
Well, the voters just don't know what to do. Nick Saban's not there, and
clearly because there's no difference at all between the coaches poll and the AP poll. I think it's the same 25 teams, and the only variance is Penn State is 8 in one and 9 in the other, and Michigan vice versa. And yeah, it's basically the same poll.
Nick Saban's gone, and someone's going to win the SEC. They better be number 1. It's got to be Georgia.
Speaking of Nick Saban, we can talk about Alabama in a second. Yeah, sorry, I got to make your point.
Do it. No.
Why is Bama 5th in both polls?
No clue. Because people can't help themselves. That's why I started the show with a tongue-in-cheek joke, but it wasn't really. I don't think that these polls should exist other than us to have conversations and debate about college football, which I love. That's what makes the sport what it is, that we get to debate all year long, including in August, when really there's no point in ranking the teams before they played a game other than to just argue. But nobody really knows. I don't know Georgia's 1 through 85. I know Ohio State's. That's my job. But the people that vote in this, the AP poll, they cannot possibly know more than one team at a time. That's even once you get into the season. I have been an AP poll voter. So have you. Mm-hmm. It is incredibly challenging. And to force people to make a prediction about what's going to happen for everyone else's roster is asinine, because then it solidifies opinions, which is also why I thought that these same voters would say, well, all I've read this entire offseason was Ohio State spent a bajillion NIL bucks and plucked everybody out of the portal that they could possibly need for any position and had the best offseason. They should be number one. And then they get to validate their own opinions and say, well, if Ohio State doesn't do it this year, like they never will. They spent all this money and they were preseason number one, and then they maybe didn't win the national title. Yeah. That's what I thought was going to happen. So in some ways I'm surprised by that, but I can also I've been in their shoes. I'm not meaning to pick on individual voters, because I didn't go also look at all 62 people who are participating, what part of the country and who they cover. I don't know. It just, they seem so pointless to me and dictate everything that happens before the season has even started.
It is unfortunate that it does seem to form opinions. I do agree with that, but I like when Michigan plays Texas in week 2, I want numbers next to the names, right? Like that's the point of it. Posterity, I guess. I don't know. Like you want, like obviously you know that's a top 10 national matchup, but like it's college football. When we see those biggest games, we want numbers next to their names. When we look at the scoreboard or afterward or during the week when we're anticipating it, and someone has to fill that void. So I'm glad, I guess, in that respect, that the AP poll does still exist, and certainly a flawed exercise. I don't know a better alternative unless you were going to have the College Football Playoff Committee establish a top 25 before the season starts, which seems to fly in the face of their exercise. So I don't think they do that. So I do think necessary evil is probably too strong of a way to describe something that is rather harmless, but I do think that we need it at the start of the season, if anything, to establish parameters for what a Texas or Michigan game is, for what a Clemson Georgia is, for think back the last couple of years what an Ohio State Notre Dame is, right? So I'm glad we have that at least.
And again, as you said, evil may be too strong a word, but when it comes to solidifying those opinions, it has a skewing effect, not just on public perception, but I think also on the polls, and then the polls moving forward in the College Football Playoff Selection Committee and the way that they use them. And I know that they have tons of data at their disposal, but how many times have we heard, whether that's just on the graphics that they put up or the conversations they have, well, top 10 win in September for a team that winds up going 6-6. Like, it's great. I did think that we were going to get to a point where Ohio State Oregon was going to be hyped as a top 5 matchup. I didn't think it was going to be August 11th with 2 versus 3. I'm surprised that Oregon's there. I think you can make a good case for why that is, and I'm not worried about it. But like, is Texas and Michigan a top 5 matchup? By the end of the year, one of those teams might be there. I don't think the other one's going to be anywhere close.
Yeah, that's probably true. But I don't know. I think you still need to kind of build the hype for the preseason game. Like, if you can't put too much on it, right? I think to your point, you can't put too much on it, but they do tend to look a little silly at the end of the year. Like LSU and USC are going to play each other in Vegas, right? And it's a top 25 game. Like USC, nothing about USC suggests that team should be ranked, 23rd? And LSU, I think, is like 14th or something like that.
USC is number 23.
Yeah.
1 spot below Kansas.
Yeah. I actually like Kansas this year.
But 2 spots above Big Ten rival Iowa.
I was going to go to the Big Ten title game.
Which is unquestionably going to be a better Big Ten team than USC.
Yeah. So like you get funny stuff like that, and there were times like Nick Saban was always sort of a genius in like scheduling a neutral site game against like the 24th ranked team in the country who had no business being in the preseason top 25. It's like, man, what a great start to the season for the Tide, right? And like LSU is going to get the same thing when it beats what might be like an average USC team,
right?
And LSU itself, it might be like an above average SEC team, right? So I think you have to be able to understand the reality of the situations without putting so much on what the actual numbers are. But I do think the numbers are we should have them in college football. Like it's one of the, as we're losing like everything else that makes college football. I hope we keep the numbers next to the names
Right.
early in the season until the playoff committee steps in and starts ranking teams.
Cling to the poll tradition. All right,
Yeah.
that's fine. I can understand that part. What did you think was? You mentioned Alabama. Do you think that's the most laughable thing? If you haven't seen it, the poll goes like this: Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Alabama. Ole Miss number 6. They will not finish number 6 in the country at the end of the year. I promise you. Notre Dame number 7. They will not finish number 7. Penn State 8, Michigan 9, Florida State 10, Missouri 11, Utah 12, LSU, Clemson, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Miami, Texas A&M, Arizona. I don't know how they appeared at number 21 personally. Kansas 22, USC 23, North Carolina State 24, Iowa 25, and no votes anywhere for Wyoming, which is the most baffling decision that you could possibly have. Well, if you have to take anything that you believe is the most wrong about this preseason poll, since it's here for us to argue,
Sure.
do you think it's Alabama or is there somebody else?
Alabama's a good one. Like I don't disagree with Alabama being necessarily like a top 10 to 12-ish team because they do bring back a fair amount from a team that went to the playoff last year, and like Kalen DeBoer is a good coach with an established track record. So I don't think Alabama's going to fall off the face of the planet. It's just funny to me that they're getting default top 5 treatment when they lost the best coach ever. Like maybe pull back a little bit on that. I think though that if I could get off that point, like the thing that might be most interesting to me when I look at that is going back to what you said earlier about how people might react to Ohio State given the tenor of the offseason. Ole Miss, there were 2 teams that got talked about a ton with like portal stuff, like buying a roster, like really loading up to do stuff, and it was Ohio State and Ole Miss. And I don't think Ohio State, after having all that the dialogue about them, is actually getting the poll bump that you would expect. But Ole Miss definitely is at number 6 in the country. And again, like that is I think that they are a like fringe playoff team. I would not be shocked if Ole Miss makes the playoff. You might, but I don't think that I will be because like 4 SEC teams are going to make the playoff at least, and I don't know if the 4th one is Ole Miss. I don't think I'd be surprised by that. But it does seem like the conversation relative to the roster has given Ole Miss a tremendous boost and not Ohio State, which I find a little interesting.
I guess maybe if Ole Miss had Davison Igbinosun, Quinshon Judkins, and Tywan Malone on their roster, I might be more willing to consider them as a top 10 team. But none of those players are there anymore. I can't quite recall what roster they're on now, but it's not in Mississippi. Whatever. Ole Miss is. I think this is the preseason part where they want to bump that up because everyone so desperately wants Lane Kiffin to accomplish something that there are people around the country that for some reason are endlessly fascinated and entertained by Lane Kiffin, and I can't relate, and I just don't see them being number 6. But I probably have less issue with them in the top 10 right now than Michigan, and I don't. You and I have had a number of conversations, especially when we did the projected win totals, and I've come around to the idea that Michigan's schedule may not be as daunting as it's perceived to be. That they could be not competitive in their 2 toughest games or 3 toughest games, and still get to 10 wins. Maybe 9-3 is right where they settle. But when you have stuff over the weekend about, gosh, this quarterback battle's ongoing, and probably because nobody's good.
Yeah,
I joked about that and thought that was like an uncertainty, and it was Michigan's defense can be really good, but you still have the ongoing issues with Sharon Moore. We don't know how that's going to resolve itself. I think everyone covering the sport expects there's going to be a punishment, and it very well could include a postseason ban. And you have no idea what their offense is legitimately going to look like and who's going to lead it. I'm surprised that they were able to remain in the top 10 personally.
I agree with everything you said. I think it's just like you want to show proper deference, I guess, to the returning national champion. So it's just like if you're filling
but
out.
These aren't the returning national.
No, I agree with you, which is why I thought it was laughable that they got a first place vote in the coaches poll. I don't know what that's about.
Does Sharon have a vote?
I don't believe he does.
Okay.
And we know Ryan Day didn't vote him one. So I don't know. That eliminates two possible candidates. They have a very, very good defense. They're going to have a very good defense this year. But yeah, there's so many questions on offense. There's questions about how many games Sharon Moore might be the head coach for this year if he's staring down the barrel of a possible suspension based off of not even the Connor Stallions. I guess it is Connor Stallion stuff, but there's enough.
He had his punishment for the initial dead period recruiting violations was part of the negotiated settlement. He already served that, so that he is past that. But
Got it.
But they did have to justify his employment as part of that because he took a suspension. The only reason that case was not fully resolved was because of Jim Harbaugh and the lack of university control. So he's done with that part, but the Connor Stallions hammer is still likely coming for him.
Too many scandals to keep track of up there. I probably would have had them top 10 only because I think their defense is going to be very good, but I don't know that they're definitely going to be a top 10 team by the end of the season. I think the last time I did my playoff projections, I did not have Michigan in. So that to me, they're more like an 8-4 kind of team. So like, it also depends what your methodology is, I suppose, when you do the preseason poll. Some people do like, I think this is what it's going to be like when the season ends. Some people just think like, I think these are the best 25 teams to start the season. That's a little more difficult, but if there were enough people thinking that way, then I guess I understand why Michigan's 9th, but I don't think you're off base with anything. I think Michigan is probably more of a middle of the pack, top 25 kind of team this year than they are a top 10 team.
How did you approach that for the preseason poll when you voted?
I think the first time I did it, I can't remember. I did it for 4 years, I think, or maybe 3 years. And the first time I did it, it was just like, these are the 25 best teams in the country, I think, like going into the season. That exercise was kind of hard, and also I thought a little like invaluable. So then I switched, which then also leaves you to kind of like reconfigure the entire thing after the first week of games gets played. So that makes you look a little bit like a psychopath. But you might have like a team at number 4 because you think they're going to make the playoff, and maybe they play like a bye game, and then someone else has a really nice win, so you bump the 4 team down to 8. It's like, well, what's your problem? They won. Why'd you move down 4 spots? So there's not an exact science to this, but I did come around to the idea that I would like to have this be a reflection of how I think the season's going to end.
When I first started voting, or the first time I did was in 2007, and so they were just starting with like the tracking every AP poll voter, where they've had them, Poll Attacks, Poll Speaks, whatever those websites were that would find the outliers and sick that fan base on you for every particular week for where you had them. And
I got UCF's fan base after me 1 week. That was fun.
I distinctly remember those were my first exposures to Oregon's fan base and Louisville's fan base, because I excluded both of them from the top 25 because my methodology was to predict where I thought they were going to end the season, not based on where you were a year ago. And I didn't have either one of them in the top 25. And these two fan bases, I got like actual physical mail back in 2007 to the Casper Star Tribune. It was like, you should probably be dead. And I was like, I will take that into consideration. But then like, that's some of the only reason it sticks in my mind is how rewarding. And I wish that I could have like written them back. And I'm like, hey, thanks for checking in. I'm still alive. And also Oregon went 5-7 and Louisville is like 4-8. So thanks for you guys for both reaching out. That's the only time that I could be like patting myself on the back for a prediction. But it's like, that's the other downside, like asking people to take part in this so that the passion of college football can be restored by attacking people who don't want to be involved in this.
Yeah, I'm of two minds there, because I've been on that end of it and it sucks. But also, if you're dumb, you should be called out for it. In your case, you weren't dumb. You were right. You had the vision there.
I probably had a lot of the things that were wrong.
Yeah, I got a bunch of crap from Central Florida fans because I forgot to rank them one week. I meant to and forgot, but that's what happens when you're filling out your AP poll at I don't know, like I think 4:00 in the morning before you got to catch a flight back to Columbus after covering a night game.
I remember it distinctly as well because it was like 2 or 3 days right before the poll was going to drop in August, and Ralph Russo called and was like, "Hey, you didn't have Oregon on your ballot. I think they're going to be like number 9." And I was like, he was like, "Did you just forget about them?" And I was like, "No, I didn't. I sent in my ballot." I was like, "Okay, like just so you know, like people are going to not be happy about that. Like that also shouldn't be the way it works. Like you have to embrace the groupthink part.
Groupthink, yeah.
I know that was always Doug's thing. Was like his early season ballots were way out of whack with where everyone else was, and that made him a piñata for these websites that track it.
Yeah, I think John Wilner does that too. Mm-hmm. he's a guy that like re-scrambles the board after the preseason poll, and people are like, "What are you doing?" But I don't have a problem with it because like there's no there. First of all, there are like no directions. You're just like, do you want to be an AP poll voter? Yes. Okay. Send us your ballot. No guidelines, by the way.
Yeah.
Rank whoever the heck you want. And then even if they did give you guidelines, like there's still no like exact right way to do it. So, yeah, I think it's rough sometimes. Maybe this is to your greater point, but more in the beginning of the show. Like people react too strongly to the AP poll. If we can just sort of take it for what it is and just kind of be happy that we can call teams ranked before the end of October, then I think that's okay. But don't let it ruin your life. If some guy from Sheboygan thinks your team is 13th and not 9th, like it's okay.
There are still 15 people and 15 coaches that think roughly 15, right? Was it the same in both? I don't know.
No, it was 15 in the AP. I have it here. 15 in the AP and 7 in the coaches poll.
Okay, so there are still people out there that believe Ohio State is going to be the best team in the country. And I think we can all agree that Ohio State and Georgia, it'd be fun to watch them play, maybe in January somewhere. Like they're pretty talented teams.
Yeah.
We'll get to that when we get to that. And we'll get back to talking about Ohio State's training camp as the week rolls along. A little bit of that quiet period coming out of the scrimmage. Then they had their family day and media opportunity or media photos, which are not for actually this side of the media, but like for social media and the program and all
social
that stuff.
Media day.
Social media day. That was on Sunday. And then stuff ramping back up here ahead of Thursday. We still don't know if or when we will see any practice. We're still hoping that that happens with Jerry Emig and Ryan Day for Thursday. But either way, we'll hear from them. We'll have some other stuff to get into on the podcast daily as it rolls along. Thanks for bearing with us on a poll version of it, the preseason poll on a Tuesday episode. He's Bill.
Tabulation Tuesday.
Tabulation Tuesday. Got it. Gosh, just edit that back into the start of the show, Brian. That's Bill. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you later.